Welcome to Red Hot Mindset. I am so glad you're here today because today we are continuing our 2020 Boston Mother Runner series, and I am so excited for this one. Today's guest started running in her 30s, but didn't race her first marathon until she was 58. She struggled with injury as she worked toward qualifications for the Boston Marathon, and her journey to motherhood is a huge victory story. Debbie Cohen is 64 and she lives in Columbia, Maryland. She's been there since 1998, and she had a 30-year career as a journalist and editor before launching a second career as a personal trainer only 5 years ago. She works primarily with older women looking to tone up, build strength and stamina, and manage chronic conditions. Debbie has been an avid swimmer her whole life, but took up running and strength training at the age of 30 to add some cross training into her routine, and she gradually developed a passion for running and competing in races. She has been married for 25 years to her husband, who works for the federal government, and they have one son, a college senior who excels in the track and field arena, and he's also a standout runner for his college team. In this episode, she shares insights and encouragement as she looks back on her journey, and I believe you will be blessed by this conversation. So let's get to it. Well, hey, Debbie, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes, I am excited for this chat. We have a lot in common, and I don't know if you realize that, but we're going to dive into some of that. But before we do, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about who you are and share a little bit about your family, where you're from, and all that good stuff.
Okay, well, I grew up in Rhode Island, a little town called Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And so New England is really in my blood. We used to spend a lot of time visiting Boston, and then I went to college outside of Boston, and my mom worked in Boston for a while. And now I live in Ellicott City, Maryland. I've lived outside the Washington, D.C. area for many, many years. I'm 64, so I'm an older runner. And we have one son who is in college. He's a senior at NYU, and I'm very proud of him. He's a runner for NYU, although he can't compete right now, which is really hard for his senior year.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So anything else?
I think that sounds great. So right now, colors are pretty, right? I mean, we're talking in the fall. The podcast will be releasing early 2021, but right now is fall. Is it just gorgeous there right now?
Well, I'm being in Maryland. It's not as nice as it would be in New England, and we're kind of having one of those falls where it's happening really fast. So I don't think it's quite as vibrant, as it could be. And it's been a very warm overall fall. So they're coming out, but then they're falling. So it's not quite as vibrant as especially what I remember growing up in New England.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it seems like fall has gone fast lately. I'm from Minnesota. We just moved to Colorado. So Minnesota usually has very pretty leaves, but the last couple of years it has been so quick that you just don't get to enjoy fall, which is my favorite season. So it's always a bummer. Colorado, we have really pretty leaves right now. They're starting to fall, but I feel like it's longer than what it was in Minnesota. So I'm just soaking it all in. And maybe it's because it's just warmer.
Yeah,
but
that's good.
There's that. But well, tell me a little bit about, I want to talk about your career. And so here's why. And this is where I said you and I have some things that are alike. You had a career as a journalist and an editor, and then you turned fitness personal trainer. And I want to hear about that transition, but I want to hear about your time as a journalist and editor. So I actually graduated with a broadcast journalism communication studies major. Never actually went into it, had a lot of great experiences in college, but because of where we moved and I got married and all these things, I never ended up going into it. But now I feel like it helped develop me to do what I'm doing now. But I just love that. So I just want to hear a little bit about your experience of being a journalist and an editor, and then how you transitioned into personal training.
Okay, sure. I was an English major in college at Brandeis University, which is outside of Boston. I always loved English and reading and writing. I always knew I wanted to write and be involved in that world somehow. So when I graduated from college, had kind of some jobs that weren't exactly on the mark, but I was doing writing and editing for some different organizations. But then I ended up going back to get my master's in journalism about 5 years out after I had lived overseas and lots of cool experiences. But then after that, I seriously started looking for journalism jobs. And I worked in the Washington area, so I had some cool jobs. But my longest term journalism job was at Education Week. It's a national newspaper that covers education, and I just loved it. It was just fantastic. What I liked most about it was not so much, the high profile, Capitol Hill, all those kinds of stories, but going to visit schools all over the country and seeing the cool things they were doing. And my specialty was kind of, it started out being early childhood education. And from that, I started covering a whole range of different issues that affect how kids show up at school, which affects their success in school. So covering everything from housing to child welfare to, poverty issues, social issues that impacted the classroom. And I found a lot of really cool programs all over the country that where schools were joining forces with organizations and groups in the community to meet the needs of some of these families and kids, that were starting off behind. So I just loved, traveling to these. I was single then, so traveling to all these places, and just the passion of the people in the schools and in the community, who weren't making a lot of money, but they were really trying to make a difference for kids and families in their community. So then from that, I transitioned to, did that for many years. And then I got a job at a large foundation in Baltimore that is specifically devoted to funding programs that help children and families. And I was in their communications department. So I was doing a lot of mainly writing and editing for them, putting out different publications and newsletters and things like that. So, and then after I had my child, which is a whole nother story I'll get to later, but it became too hard to kind of juggle all that. So I decided to transition to a consultant and work for a lot of these different organizations I had covered as a journalist from home. So I could do my work from home and be involved in my son's schooling and education, because as older parents, and we lived far from any family, I just couldn't leave work, go do something at school, and then I'd have to go back to work. They didn't have all these family friendly policies then. So working at home turned out to be a really good move for me, and I did well. I had plenty of work and contracts and things, but I was always a huge fitness buff, and just decided one day I wanted to just see what it was like to study for the personal training certification and then kind of take it from there. So I gradually started doing more than that. And by the way, this was already in my late 50s or so. And so I kind of look at it as like a retirement career almost.
Love it.
But I was still doing both for a long time. I don't know how I did that, because I'd be so active with clients all day, and then I'd come home and have all these deadlines for writing. And about 2 years ago, I finally said, you know what, I'm done with that. I loved it. It was great, but I really want to focus on the personal training now. So for the last 5 years, I have worked at a gym and also some work on my own. And I live in an area where there's a lot of older people. So my primary clientele has been older women, like from 50 all the way up to 90. A lot of them who've had some chronic injuries or health conditions, and helping them see that no matter what happens to you, there's so much you can still do to be active and to strengthen your muscles and your cardiovascular system. And I've formed such a kindred spirit with all these women, because I'm an older woman myself, and I kind of understand. I'm tough, but I'm also understanding of what they're going through and wanting to help them build their self-esteem. So it's been a good fit.
That's super cool. So in your journalism experience, was there anything that stood out to you, like a really cool experience that you had, an adventure you got to do?
Well, there was one there were many, but I when Hillary Clinton came out with her book, It Takes a Village, okay, and that was kind of right up my alley, writing about intersection between education and communities and all that. And so when her book was coming out, my editor said, okay, we want you to try to get an interview. So I wrote to the publisher, explained my background and everything. And I was actually out of town covering something else. And I get a email or message saying that they wanted me to do the interview. Okay, but this was in January, I believe, of 1996. And there was a huge blizzard back in Washington, DC area, and I could not get back. So I was stuck in, I got as far from Seattle to Dallas, and then they said, we're not going anywhere because you guys are all snowed in. So I couldn't get back, and the interview was just in a few days. I hadn't even read the book because they were supposed to FedEx me the book. And so it was a big deal. Also, I was stuck in Dallas with no clothes, no luggage, because we didn't get anything. And I'm going down to the gift shop and buying like Dallas Cowboy t-shirts and things. Like, it was crazy. So, and it was like the movie Groundhog Day, because every day I'm trying to call and see if I can get out of there. Couldn't get out of there, same routine, you know. And finally, after like the third day, was able to get out of there. But then we got as far as Atlanta. We still couldn't go home. Anyway, it was all crazy. I got back the night before the interview. Still didn't have the book, but my husband had managed to go and find it somewhere. It had just come out. So I get home after all this. I have to stay up all night to read the book. And then I have to get to the White House, and our car, everything was still snowed in. So I'm taking the subway and buses and trains and stuff trying to get there. And I got there, and had to walk from the subway or something. And I had these really clunky boots on and my nice suit. And I got there, and I said, let me just get in there 5 minutes before she comes in so I can take off these boots and put my heels on. So it was just down to the absolute wire. But I got there, and the interview went fine. And so that was kind of a very memorable journalism story.
That's so fun. What an adventure that was, right?
Yeah.
I love it. So, well, let's transition into running, because I really want to hear about your journey there too. I know that you grew up as a swimmer. So how did running come into play? What made you kind of fall in love with it?
Yeah, I had learned to swim when I was like 3 years old. We used to belong to a pool in the summer. And so I'd always done a lot of swimming. And then I swam on my college team. And even after college, I kept up pretty frenetic swimming schedule, because it was a great stress reliever for me. And I developed a friendship somewhere along the line of someone that did all these. They swam, they ran, they did strength training, and I kind of thought, you know what, I really should be doing more than just swimming, because I was getting burnt out. And so I thought, I'll try a little running. So I literally would just run once or twice a week, maybe at most. But I started entering races just for fun. And I started when I was 30 doing my first running. So I started doing some races, and I would do, pretty well in the races. One day I remember I hear my name being called for an award, and I didn't even think that was like a possibility. And so then after that, I started to get a little more hooked, but I still wasn't doing that much running until I moved to Columbia, Maryland area. It's a huge running community here, very, very active running club. Were triathlons here. There was just a very active community, which I loved. And so I just started showing up at more running events and gradually started doing more. But I didn't do my first distance race, like a half marathon, until I was in my mid to late 50s. And then I didn't do my first marathon until I was 58.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
So what was your first marathon? What was it like?
It was in Miami in January, which was nice to kind of go someplace a little warmer in January. And I had heard that it was pretty flat, and it was. And it was a really cool marathon. It covered a lot of ground, going by beaches and then in little cities and neighborhoods. And, it was just very fun. I was hoping I would be able to qualify for Boston, because I'd heard, what the time was. And I thought, maybe I can do that. And I missed it, but I still did, pretty well. And I really enjoyed it. It was fun. So then I qualified for Boston on my third marathon, which was the Delaware Marathon. And what was cool was that my husband and my son were there, and my son, got to see me cross the finish line and make my time and everything. And then, like I said, he went on to, once he started high school, he showed up after school for running, and then he just never stopped. So it's something that we really share and we talk about even to this day. Like, he texted me last night and said, oh, do you know this runner from my college just was first place in some huge half marathon? So it's nice to kind of always share experiences about that.
I love that. I love that it's like a mother-son bond that you have, and that you can really, really share it, because he knows exactly what you're going through as a runner. And you can share your ups and downs and just have that. And I think as being an example for him too, just even an example saying, hey, you just because you don't start until you're 58 running in a marathon, you still can do it, right? And I think that's really cool for you as you're training the older women, and as you're doing all these things, you're showing and proving that it's never too late to pick something up or to work on your fitness or to do these things. Now, I'd love to talk a little bit about your motherhood journey, since we're talking about your son, and a little bit about how your struggle victory story with motherhood.
Okay. Well, I got a late start in even trying to have a family. My husband, my current husband, is my second husband. So I had been divorced and hadn't had children in my first marriage. And I think I was around 30 at that time. And then I didn't meet my husband until I was later in my 30s. And we both wanted to have kids. And, it was just everything was taking a long time. And um, I had a couple of miscarriages, and it was really painful because each time it had taken a really long time to get pregnant.
Mm.
And the first one was an ectopic pregnancy. So that was, that was kind of bad. But anyway, and I was going through a lot personally at that time because my mother had cancer and she was dying. And there was just a lot of stress going on in our lives. And then I got offered this job. We were living in Virginia, and I got offered this job in Baltimore. And at a certain point, I just said, okay, this is what I'm doing now. That didn't work out, as much as I wanted it to. I'm going to move with my husband and take this new job. And this is what I'm doing, and that was as far as my vision could see. Well, within a couple of months of moving and starting the new job, I did get pregnant. And I was 42 at the time. So that was a pretty big deal. And it was totally unexpected, and definitely think of it as a miracle, because I wasn't even expecting it at that point. And it was after my mother had already died. So we kind of felt like she, had something to do with it. So, and the cool thing too about that was we had picked out a name for him, a certain name. But when it got closer, we just thought, oh, a lot of people are naming their sons that. We didn't want to do that. So we changed the name. And after he was born, we're Jewish, so they give you a Hebrew name. So after he was born and we heard what his Hebrew name was, we were told that translates into gift of God.
Oh, wow. How cool.
So
you didn't know that.
His name, Jonathan, the Hebrew name of that actually literally means gift of God. So we're like, this was all meant to be. So we always call him our miracle boy.
I love that. It's so cool. I love hearing stories like that. And just, our plans aren't always the way it works out, but when things work out and we look back, we're like, okay, I can understand maybe a little bit. And that's really neat. So when did he get into running? Did he get into it early on, or is it something that he developed later on in life?
Well, he was he was always really good at sports. He did a lot of soccer, and he was really good at the running, part of soccer. And he did swimming too. He did a lot of things, but he would see me doing races, and he came to a couple races with me and ran in them as a little kid. And boy, have times changed, because now he can run like quadruple circles around me. So, but it was really when he was going to start high school, I think he knew some older kids that were doing it, and he said, I'm gonna go out for running. And I didn't think he would stick with it, because a lot of things he didn't stick with, he would try, but he wouldn't stick with. But like I said, from the first time he went, you had to just stay after school for the practice. And so you were there already, you didn't have a choice to go home until someone picked you up. So from that very first day, he just kept going and never stopped. So, and it was really cool to watch him develop and to go to all his meets and stuff, because he went from, just really struggling with it as a freshman to being their top distance runner as a senior, and going to state and everything else. And then, getting into a good school and running for them. So, and it's still been really fun to go to college meets when we can. So we're kind of missing that right now, but
Oh, I bet.
Um, yeah.
Now, does he do track and field to like spring sports? And are they hoping to have a spring season?
Yeah, we're hoping. We don't know yet, but yeah, they didn't have cross country, and winter would be indoor track, which I doubt there's any way they would do that. So we are hoping that maybe he will have a spring season, but it's too early to tell. I mean, New York has is ahead of the curve now in terms of
Okay.
they've been really doing a good job of safety measures and things like that, and they've been very strict. So New York is in good shape. So who knows, maybe they'll be able to do it. But one thing he's thinking of doing, he and a couple other seniors that he knows, is holding off on a couple classes so that they can go back in the fall and still be eligible to do one more season of cross country.
Oh, very cool. That would be awesome because
Yeah.
it is hard to miss out. I think about the high school seniors and the college seniors just last spring who missed out on if they had
Yeah.
sports or whatever it was, and how hard that is to miss out as a senior. Like that's not how you envision your year. So I love that they have that gumption to just say, you know what, maybe we'll just stick around for a little longer and so that we can do what we love.
Yeah, I mean, if he decides to do that, that'll be totally fine. But we feel like he was, and he appreciates too that he had 2.5 full years of the full college experience and the sports and all that. So we're very grateful for that. You have to be grateful for whatever you've had, prior to and even during and after this pandemic. So we try to keep a good perspective on it.
Yeah, yeah, very true. And I love just being able to see how kids develop their passions and what they do with them and how it develops how they're using them. And that's really neat to hear. So I want to talk a little bit about your running again. You've done 10 minute marathons, right?
Yep.
Tell me which one was your favorite and why was maybe it was the experience or whatever it was. Why was it your favorite?
Um, it's I guess it would have to be Boston for sure. I've only done one,
Yeah.
and I'll get into that a little later. But and that was a really, really tremendous experience for me. But I think I've always taken it so seriously that it's hard for me to enjoy them, because from the very first one I did, I have to get a I have to get a BQ, or so many people I know just do it to do it, and so I'm sort of resolving to approach things a little bit differently so I can enjoy it more. But I did enjoy Miami, my first one, and I probably enjoyed all of them to some extent. But Boston was a pretty cool experience for me. I have a dear nephew, niece-in-law, and great niece and nephew that were able to come out and um, see me at the finish line, and they even did a little video and go out with them afterward. And it was really, 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 it was an amazing experience. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Especially because having gone to school there so long ago and having so many memories from a different part of my life, and you go through all these different neighborhoods, and I kind of had things associated with almost every place I saw along the way, so including running right into the city of Boston. So it was very emotional.
Yeah, I can see that where there's just these pinpoints of different places. Like I went into it not seeing all these places beforehand. And I could imagine if you have the nostalgia of being there in the past and all these things, that could be an even cooler experience. Just, running by and being like, oh, I remember that. Or, man, this was a special time or things like that. That's really, really cool. I want to
Yeah.
talk about your experience there. It was 2017, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. But before we do, I want to hear about your qualifying. Just what was it that made you want to qualify for the Boston Marathon? And when did that thought come into play? Because I know your first marathon, you thought about it, but when did you really have the drive to work toward it?
I think I did from the very beginning, and I probably wouldn't have, but honestly, I never even thought I would do a marathon. I was perfectly happy doing shorter races. I was still doing a lot of swimming. I still do swim, but it wasn't something that I thought I would ever do. But actually, um, a good friend of mine, who's also about my age and who wasn't, nearly as active as I was growing up, just decided she was going to start running at a certain point in her life, when she was going through some difficult things, and it was just a challenge she took on. And one day she told me she was going to do a marathon, and I'm like, what? You're going to do a marathon? You haven't been running that long and everything? And she had joined a group that approached it very, deliberately and very slowly. And um, she just explained to me, well, it's not like you have to go out and do a long run every day. It's gradual, and you only have to do this many, whatever. And I thought, if she can do it, I definitely can do it. Okay, so that's what motivated me to try my first one. But because I was involved in my local running group, and people were like, "Oh, well, maybe you can qualify for Boston." It wasn't something that was even in my mind. So I think from that very first one, I was like, maybe I can. So I was maybe 10 minutes off or something.
Okay.
So after that, I did, it was like, okay, now you have to do this. So I qualified, did the 2017. And I was hoping I would qualify at Boston. Well, little did I know that Boston is a very hard marathon to
Yes, it is.
requalify at. Super hard course. So I just quietly found a marathon a month later and went and did it, and was able to qualify for the next year, 2018, without that much effort, because, I was tapering, and I was relaxing after that Boston, and then I just was able to go out there and do it. So I was all happy about that. But then that winter, I injured myself, and I had a stress fracture in my left foot. And so I had to, take a lot of time off from running and heal. And
Mm.
so I couldn't go to the Boston Marathon because I just wasn't healed enough completely to train for it. So that was really disappointing. So then it turned out that I spent like the next 2 years on and off, like continually marathon training to try to get in again. And I
Mhm.
didn't make it for 2019, but I did make it for 2020, and I just barely,
Oh,
barely squeaked by. And it was hard too, because here I was 3 years older, and they had just made the times 5 minutes faster for every age group.
yes.
Um,
That was not
so that was not fun, and it was really hard, and I just barely made it. And then I had to wait several weeks because I had a small, they didn't know like what the cutoff was going to be.
fun.
And when I finally found out on my last birthday, when I had just turned 63, on my birthday, I got the email saying that I got in. I'm like, this is my best birthday present ever.
Oh,
Yeah. So, but then 2020 happened. So, uh, wasn't able to do it, and was, extremely bummed out when I found out they were going to be doing it virtually. But I just finally turned my mindset around, and I'm like, this is my 2020, and I'm doing it, and I'm just going to treat it like as much like the real thing as I can, and have fun with it. And I did.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's talk about, wh- so when you first found out that 2020 was going to be officially canceled and turned virtual, what were your initial thoughts or feelings on it?
I thought, that can't be right. That cannot be right. I kept reading it over and over again. I sent an email, to BAA saying, this isn't fair to people. Like, I thought at the very least we'd be guaranteed for 20. I didn't expect them not to cancel it, but I thought we'd be guaranteed for 2021. And I was really upset at the time, but it makes total sense, because they couldn't guarantee that,
Mhm.
not knowing what was even going to happen in 2021 and how big they could even run a race. So they did a really good job of, over time, like sending us so much support, as sending us so much supportive emails and resources and connections to other people and activities and things that, after a while it was just like, what, they're trying hard to make this worthwhile, and I'm just going to go for it. So I even did I even did a little video for my Facebook, where when I got my package in the mail with, the bib and all the different things in it, I said, here I am reporting live from the Boston Expo, which is on my couch. And, let's see what's in this. I don't have to wait in a long line. I'm not at a hotel, I just have to open this box. And so I kind of had fun with it.
That's fun. Well, and that's what we needed to do. We needed to figure out
Yeah.
how to have fun and how to enjoy the journey, because we aren't really guaranteed tomorrow. We aren't guaranteed to be able to run forever or do these things. So we have to experience them as we do. And, I want to hear about that 2017 experience. So let's take it. I want to hear about that. We're going to talk about the virtual and how you made it special. But what made 2017 a really special experience for you?
Um, I guess a lot of it had to do with my memories of Boston, as from childhood. up through college. Because like I said, my family, that was growing up in Rhode Island, it was a special thing to go to Boston and see all the sights. And my mother and I would shop at, Filene's Basement, which I don't even think is a thing anymore, but it was, and then we'd go have lunch, like up at the top, there was a nice restaurant, and it just had a lot of memories associated with it. And then also going to college there, at Brandeis, we were right near a train stop. So we would, you could take the train into Cambridge and Boston. So, as college kids, we did that every single weekend. We would go and do things, in the city. And then thirdly, my mother working right downtown, she worked in Copley Plaza, which is actually right where the Boston Marathon route, goes by there. And so like just the sight of those buildings and those things that had all these memories associated with them, just made it really, really, really a special experience.
That's awesome. I love it. So when you crossed the finish line of your first Boston, what was that like? What emotions came up? Do you remember?
Again, it's like that feeling where you're turning on these streets in the city that are, familiar to me, but from many different parts of my life. When you turn onto Boylston Street. And then the icing on the cake was, like I said, having my family members, they were in the stands, and, I didn't think there's any way they would see me. There's so many people, I had given them an idea when I thought I would be coming in, and I was sort of within that time period. But all of a sudden I heard my name, and I turned around, and I didn't even realize they were able to take a video. So they got me, really close to the finish line, and I turned around and, did the fist pounding and everything. And it was just super, super fun. That actually really had a big impact on me, just having them there, and them capturing all that. And then they caught up with me, afterward, and we had a nice dinner together and everything. And also one thing that was really neat was my great niece, her name is Katya,
Okay.
and my great nephew Ethan were there. And Katya told her mother afterwards that, this was like a highlight of her life, seeing her aunt, crossing the finish line at Boston.
That's so sweet.
And she's a very active, athletic little girl. This was a few years ago. She's now, I think she just turned 12. But so it's really neat to see. And I'm always amazed with younger women and girls that they have so much more self-confidence and fearlessness than I had growing up, because even though I was so athletic and I really always just loved moving, and any little thing that would come out, like a pogo stick or whatever, I would spend hours on it. I wouldn't just like go do it occasionally. I would like literally spend hours on it. But I wasn't pushed towards sports as my older brothers were, because it just wasn't, that much of a thing back then for girls to be pushed in that direction. So I'm always really inspired by the younger generation of women and how they don't have some of those barriers that we had.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really neat. And I love that you're inspiring them too. Like they're looking up to you and they can see you as a role model and just be encouraged by what you're doing. And I just think that's a really special thing. So what you did the virtual and chose to do it. What did you do to kind of make it more special for you? Because obviously we're all kind of out there on our own doing it. We could just run by ourselves or whatever. What did you do? And how did you incorporate other people with you?
Well, what I decided to do was, I have a special place that I like to train for I like to do long runs, and it's the Northern Central Railroad Trail,
Okay.
which goes for many, many miles through Maryland, Pennsylvania. And it's not that close to like I have to drive like a good 40 minutes to get there. So it's not where I normally run. Where I normally run, our area is extremely hilly. So it's great training, but when you want to do a few 20-mile runs or whatever, you don't necessarily want to be doing them on hills all the time. And especially it was such a hot summer. It was a scorchingly hot summer. So I love going to this trail because I love the woods, and it's a crushed gravel trail, and it's pretty flat.
Okay.
And you just go for miles. You just go, 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 go. So I had done all my really long run training there. So I decided that's where I'm going to do it. I wasn't able to get anybody who was able to do it with me per se, but I knew it was a popular running and biking trail. So I knew I would be with people, okay, that are being active, that are running, that are biking. And I also knew that I did know a couple people that were going to be doing it there that I thought I might run into. So that's what I did. And my husband was going to be at the end. My husband works for the U.S. government, but he also is a photographer on the side, and he's a really fantastic photographer, and he loves photography. So our lives are very well documented. So I can say, but anyway, so having him there at the end to take photos and all that was great. So I did print out the start the finish line. I had it printed out really, really big. And the break tape thing, I had that printed out big. I spent some money on that, but went to Kinko's, had that done. And I also got a friend of mine to do some water and Gatorade stops for me. And he's a very special friend that I met at the gym where I work. And he has run Boston like 15 times.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And he's not doing that anymore, but he did it for so many years. And before I did my first one, he gave me a lot of encouragement, and he showed me, films of when he ran it, and, just gave me a lot of advice and stuff. So he said he would come out and help. So he sat at a picnic table and he was like, water, Gatorade, so that was nice.
That's good.
But I was really not shy when I was on that race. Like, I had my bib on. I had my, I'm on my local racing team. So I had my racing team shirt on, and I had my Boston bib on. And when I started out early in the morning, I wasn't seeing that many people. And so when I did see people, every once in a while, I'd say, I'm doing Boston.
I love it.
And some of them were like, oh yeah, yeah. And I said, no, really. And so then they literally turned around and start cheering. And then some people did start to see it. And, so I got quite a bit of support actually from people that were just out enjoying their day. And I saw people I didn't even know I would see that happened to be there. And I did see the two people that I knew from my community that were going to be doing it. I ran into them at different times. So that was nice. And then what was cool was at the end, when I started getting like a mile or two to where I was going to finish, people started saying my name because they had seen like the signs and stuff that my husband had put out.
Oh.
So that was pretty, they said, oh, you got a fan club down there. And right after I went through the finish line, and he had put the signs all up and everything. Right after I finished, somebody else was finishing too that I didn't know. And right after we had taken all our pictures, he said, can we use your sign to take the pictures? So we said, sure. So that was kind of nice to share that, with someone else who was doing it. So it was a lot of fun. It really was. I mean, I felt like if I'd known it was a real race, I probably would have pushed it a little bit harder, but that was what I wanted to do, was just finally enjoy a marathon where I knew there was no possibility of worrying about a BQ or anything like that. So, and I think I accomplished that. So
that's awesome. This was your chance to just enjoy it and just go out for that fun and get all in. That's good. We need to do that sometimes. Yeah. It's important to have goals, but at the same time, I think it's important for us to really just sit back and enjoy it sometimes and get to really see everything going on around us. So
yeah, and I love the woods. There's something about the woods I really there's different bodies of water and streams and creeks and things, and it's just very peaceful. So I did feel like I probably enjoyed that more than I enjoyed a lot of other marathons, just because I was more aware of things.
I love it. I love it. So tell me, why would 2020 Boston Marathon have been a victory run for you?
Well, it was, after the first time, after I ran it, and then when I wanted to run it again the next year and I got in, but I couldn't, that was really, really hard for me, especially because a lot of people I knew were doing it and posting about it. And I can't be there. So, and that it took me, 2 more years of extremely hard work. Mm-hmm. And I've been slowing down, in the past few years. So it was just really getting a lot harder for me. Plus, I think I was a little manic about it. I probably shouldn't have tried to do so many, or I'd taken bigger breaks in between. But the fact that I, really put my mind to it, and I just kept trying. And I thought, this is going to be it. I really don't need to do any more marathons. So it would be so great if my last one is at Boston. Okay. So then that happened, and then when I squeaked by, with such a tiny margin, I was just I was just so ready to do it. And I was trained for April, even though I knew they were going to probably cancel April. Then I was almost trained for September. And so, yeah, this would have really been a huge victory lap for me. And maybe I would have said after that, that, that's it. I don't need to do any more marathons. I never intended to even do one.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. It's something, there's an addiction to those marathons. You do the one and you're like, huh, I think I could do a little better. Or, that
Yeah.
was really exhilarating. I don't know what it is about the runner's high, but when you finish the marathon, it kind of sucks you in. So do you foresee more marathons in your future? I know you had talked about Boston being your last marathon, going down to shorter races, but now do you feel like you have unfinished business there? Do you feel like the virtual marathon was special enough that that was a good last hurrah?
Well, I have decided, I finally, like, because I was really stressing about this for like literally several years. So
Yeah.
um, I finally am in a good place because number one, we have no idea what's happening with if there even is going to be a 2021. Now, if there is, I don't think there's much chance I would get in because my margin was so small. It's going to be a smaller field size, and they've got people from 2020 and some from 2021. So I don't think I'd have much chance of getting in. However, here's the kicker. I finally figured out that I just turned 64 a couple weeks ago. Okay. So my next birthday, September 25th, I will be 65. So if they don't have it until after September 25th, I got 15 more minutes
Ooh.
of a
Yeah.
qualifying window. So if that's a possibility that could happen. Or if not, I could try for 2022 if they have 2022, because again, I've got extra 15 minutes. So, but you know what, at this point, I don't really care because I have no control about any of that. Don't know if any of that's going to happen or not, or how it'll play out. So for the first time in a really long time, like I'm a lot happier because I'm just not stressing about it. But I did go out yesterday and did a half marathon. And it was my first live race since early 2020. And I really had a good time and I got my age group and all that. Um, so I feel like I'm trying to enter a new era of running where I'm going to try and enjoy it more and not stress out so much. So, if I have the chance to do Boston again, I would do it. But at this point, I don't feel like I'm going to really keep pushing again for months and months to try to achieve that goal if it doesn't happen this time.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I think one thing that we've learned in this season is we really can't control anything or predict
Right.
anything. So, and that it is so far away that we just don't know. Anything can happen. So I love that you want to take it more for enjoyment and maybe find some other different goals as well. And if Boston comes, Boston comes. So
Right.
that's really neat.
Exactly.
I love that mindset. I think it's important for us when we shift our mindset and say, okay, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I have a really good buffer, but it's only a 2020 qualification. So if they cancel next year, I
Right.
won't get to run either. And I've kind of come to terms with that, saying, it's not that big of a deal. There's other things I can focus on. And you know what? I just want to find joy in the journey. I want to just
Yep.
experience life and be present where I am. And, I think that's important. So I love that. That's kind of your mindset right there. And, I think it's cool that you're qualifying in your 60s. It's funny. My dad actually took up snowboarding when he turned 60. So I
Oh,
started
wow.
snowboarding in high school. They actually had me later on in life too. They kind of, it took them like 18 years to have kids. So
Wow. Oh,
yeah,
that's more than me.
yeah, it's crazy. And so I started snowboarding in high school, and he thought, well, I'm going to start snowboarding too. So at 60, he's going down that hill. But I just think it's cool because I think it's an inspiration to say, you don't just stagnate. You got to keep going, and you got to stay active and feel young, and you be young. And my dad was like, of all the parents that I grew up with, I felt like he was the youngest and he was the oldest. And so I just think that's cool. And I love that you're a personal trainer to help older women as well in their fitness. And something that I loved hearing is that you talk a lot about injury prevention. And I would love to hear just a couple little tidbits of things that you've used to help you prevent injuries? Because I know probably after having the foot injury, you've started kind of adding these different things in, these different techniques.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, well, I also had an issue with strained hip that actually kept me from doing maybe even my first or second marathon. I can't remember. But anyway, so I've incorporated a lot of exercises into what I teach, what I teach a lot of my clients of hip strengthening, stretching, foam rolling, and balance. Okay. Those things are so critical. And exercises for your feet and your ankles. We use them and we have to rely on them, but we don't really focus on them enough. And I try to do those things regularly myself, these different exercises. Some of them are sort of yoga based and some of them aren't. Um, and I really incorporate that into my own routine and into all my clients' routine. And I'm a huge believer in stretching, dynamic stretching before you do anything. That's, doing something cardiovascular or lightly moving around, okay, in different ways. And static stretching afterwards, which is where you're, holding a muscle and pulling or something. You don't want to do that before. You want to do that after, when you're already loose. So I, to this day, like people in my running club, I see them go out cold, come back after a huge long run, just stop, go to coffee or something. I'm like, no, not a good, in my opinion, and also in my experience and experience of many other clients as well as athletes that I respect. So huge on that. And, really, I'm huge on cross training. To this day, I still swim a few times a week because it just feels so good in terms of stretching your muscles out and cardiovascular, using your body a different way. And I have to tell you, during the peak of the pandemic quarantine, when no pools were open, I was doing a fair amount of running, and I was so tight. My muscles were so tight without having that swimming.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it made a huge difference for me. So I was having to do a lot more stretching, a lot more foam rolling and stuff like that. And now that I've started back in the pool again, oh my God, it's just like night and day. I did that half marathon yesterday. Today I get in the pool, I come out of the pool, I feel 100% perfect. It's like magic, honestly. So anyway, a combination of things, not thinking that it's all about hundreds and hundreds of miles every week and nothing else, and also strength training, especially women, our bones, we really need to be doing it sooner rather than later. I wish I had started that earlier in my life than I did. But just like I tell all my clients, better late than never.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are great tips. I probably should take up swimming. I actually was a swimmer for a little bit in like middle school, but I don't like the water because I don't like being cold. But I do see how good it would be to like open up the muscles and just use them in different ways. And cross training is so, so important. So thank you for sharing those. If you were to give other mother runners advice about sticking to a goal or about accomplishing whatever, what would your advice be?
um I think you can look at a goal not just as, a punishment or something unattainable, but I think for a lot of us, just having a goal really keeps us motivated to keep up a good fitness routine. I mean, again, I wish I had started the running earlier because it actually turned out I'm actually a way better runner than I was a swimmer. And after competing in swimming in college, like I never was competing in swimming anymore, but I was just swimming to swim. But once I started running, the goal of the races, and it also helped me learn different ways of training where it's not like you do the same thing or the same number of, laps or miles every day. You're really gearing to do different types of runs to achieve different results and be part of an overall plan. So, and it's just something that makes it fun too. And it also, other than during this period of time in our lives, it's motivating to be in something with other people that are also training or going to races together. So it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's true. Community is huge. Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Debbie. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I appreciate being able to hear your story and share your story with other listeners. And I wish you all the best as you're going after your own goals and coming up with new ones and possibly seeing you at Boston here in the future.
Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah.
Um, can I just add one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say that our son, his motivation and role model, it's not just me because um, my husband also really, he's not a runner, but he's an avid, exerciser. He got into swimming more, because of me when he met me, like I was swimming a lot. So he would come and he gradually got to the point where he does way more than me now. And he's made it a huge part of his life as well, and strength training as well. And also we do a lot of walking and hiking when we can and things like that. And that's how I was raised, in a pretty athletic family too. We always went out and did a lot of hikes and stayed really active. And so that would be something that I would really stress for parents too, as far as having a goal and having a routine. It's not just for you, but when your kids grow up seeing that, as my son did with both of us, they just think that's the normal way to be. And so I can't stress that enough, that don't think about it as just being, for you and to lose weight or, feel better, which you will, but for setting that example for kids as well.
Yeah, I love that. Being the example, making it a family thing, bringing your family in on your goals and encouraging them in their fitness and doing that by doing it together. I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Debbie ran her first marathon at 58 years old. I'm too old isn't an excuse we get to use when it comes to going after a goal or something we feel called to do. I love that she and her husband made fitness and goals a family thing to inspire their son to be active and go after his own goals. What an important lesson for us to learn. I feel kind of a kindred spirit with Debbie too, as she had a longevity in the journalism world and moved into the fitness scene, both things I was passionate about too. As she so well shares, the future is unpredictable and we can't control most of our circumstances. So I hope that you choose to live in the present and enjoy the journey as you run your race. I believe in you.